It's 6 p.m. on a Friday here in Korea. Welcome to a newscast. I'm Daniel Che. Let's start with the headlines first. In a keynote speech to the UN General Assembly, South Korea's foreign minister urges the body to take meaningful action against North Korea for its human rights violations and nuclear threats, and reconsider whether the regime deserves a place in the UN. Help is coming from all corners of Korea to rescue Hanjin Shipping. Its parent company, a rival shipper, Korean Air, KDB, and the government are combining their efforts to try and salvage the once mighty company. The sports ministers of South Korea, China, and Japan complete their two-day meeting, a timely event as all three will play Olympic host, one after another. Seoul's top diplomat called on the world to get more serious about the threats posed by North Korea. The foreign minister also highlighted Pyongyang's nuclear program is in its final stage of development following the recent nuke test. Our Kwon So-ah starts us off.
North Korea is now in the final stage of nuclear weaponization, according to South Korea's top diplomat Yoon Byung-se. In his keynote speech to the UN General Assembly Thursday, Minister Yoon said the North's 2 nuclear and 22 missile tests this year alone show the regime's weapons program has neared a tipping point.
The latest nuclear test was the strongest ever. The test interval was also significantly reduced from average 3 years to 8 months. Given North Korea's unpredictability and its penchant for provocations, its next nuclear provocations may come even sooner than we expect.
With North Korea ignoring its international obligations, Minister Yoon said a fundamental question is whether North Korea actually deserves to be a member of the United Nations.
I believe it's high time to seriously reconsider whether North Korea is qualified as a peace-loving UN member, as many countries are already questioning.
Seoul's top diplomat also stressed the regime is wasting money on its weapons development while disregarding the needs of its own people, as it conducted its 5th nuclear test while the country was suffering some of its worst flooding in decades. Yoon also called on the UN to take a closer look at the North's overseas forced labor program. Prior to his speech, Minister Yoon told reporters that it's time for the UN Security Council to take its discussions on North Korea's human rights violations a step further and take, quote, meaningful action. According to an official, the UN Security Council is mulling whether to include Pyongyang's human rights abuses on a new sanctions resolution currently under discussion following the North's 5th nuclear test. While it's the UN Human Rights Council that usually deals with human rights issues, the UN Security Council's approach has been under the microscope for some time, as it is the only organ of the United Nations that has the authority to issue binding resolutions to its members. Kwon So-ah, Arirang News.
Meanwhile, North Korea has not made an official request to Seoul for flood relief after being hit by last month's deadly typhoon. Perhaps it's feeling the pinch. According to our Connie Kim, the regime's recent report on South Korean aid is being read as a present-day request for help.
North Korea seems to have made an indirect appeal to South Korea for flood relief, following what it describes as the worst flooding since Korea's liberation from Japanese colonial rule. On Friday, the North Korean website Nenara carried a story on Kim Il-sung's decision to send aid to South Korea after a deadly typhoon hit the country in 1959. The report said the regime's founder decided to send rice, shoes, and cement to the south, which saw a death toll of 850. Analysts in the south read this as an indirect appeal to Seoul for aid. In a response issued later Friday, Seoul's Unification Ministry acknowledged the North has decided to provide aid, but made clear that it had rejected the offer. The ministry also reiterated the government's current stance that it'll not help Pyongyang at a time when North Korea continues to advance its weapons programs in defiance of the sanctions imposed by the international community.
Whether the North is given support from the outside or inside, the credit will solely go to the dictator. We cannot erase the feeling that providing flood relief under the circumstances would be ineffectual.
North Korea stopped reporting on the flood damage a week before it pushed the button on its 5th nuclear test on September 9th, and only started talking about it again a day afterward. The regime has been mobilizing its soldiers and workers to help the 140,000 North Koreans affected by the typhoon that hit North Hamgyong province starting last month. While Seoul does not plan to provide flood relief to the north, the UN Central Emergency Response Fund says it'll make its own decision on the matter soon. Most North Korea experts say that the regime is exploiting the flood damage to undermine the sanctions on the north. Connie Kim, Arirang News.
In the domestic political arena, amid the gridlock, Korea's political parties quarreled over the planned deployment of THAAD and how to deal with the debt-laden Hanjin Shipping to the source of logistics chaos across the globe. Our Ji Myung-gil tells us more.
The ruling Saenuri Party says that both the ruling and opposition parties should put aside partisan interests when discussing security issues. In a written statement on Friday, Saenuri Party spokesperson Kim Jong-jae said lawmakers should be at the forefront of devising measures to counter North Korea's provocations. But instead, the opposition parties are causing national division by protesting the deployment of the THAAD missile defense system. The main opposition Minju Party of Korea, which remains divided on the deployment, criticized the administration of President Park Geun-hye for politicizing the issue.
It's not right for President Park Geun-hye's administration to unilaterally decide about deploying THAAD, as it's a national security issue.
The Minju Party spokesperson added that in the aftermath of the North nuclear test, the THAAD debate does not have to end, and urged the government to send a motion on THAAD to the National Assembly so lawmakers can discuss it further. Meanwhile, the minor opposition People's Party focused on the crisis at Hanjin Shipping and criticized the government for mishandling it.
The government was helpless in containing the fallout from Hanjin Shipping's decision to file for court receivership. It has caused damage to Hanjin's creditors and the domestic shipping industry and wasted taxpayer money.
Hanjin Shipping's decision sent ripples through the global shipping network earlier this month, as the company left more than half of its ships stranded at sea, out of fear that they could be seized by creditors. The People's Party urged the government to minimize the effects of the logistics disruption and do all it can to ensure small and mid-sized sellers can unload the cargo. Ji Myung-gil, Arirang News.
At the National Assembly, a final parliamentary Q&A session has resumed following a delay this morning. The session was postponed due to a disagreement between the rival political parties over a recent cabinet appointment, but is now well underway. For more, we connect to our Shin Se-min standing by on the line. Se-min, what's the latest from the session so far?
Yes, the session got off to a rocky start, as you said, but as we speak, rival political party lawmakers are taking turns firing questions at government officials, and the main topics of discussion today are education and social affairs. But only half of the lawmakers are present at the assembly because the majority of ruling Saenuri Party lawmakers are at a previously scheduled general party meeting. Assembly Speaker Chung Se-gyun insisted the Q&A session begin without the ruling party members, saying the session could not be delayed any longer. The delay was caused by a clash between the rival political parties over a motion to appoint Kim Jae-soo to the position of Agriculture Minister. The opposition parties say Kim is unfit for the job because of alleged ethical lapses that include allegations of questionable real estate transactions when he was the president of state-run Korea Agro-Fisheries and Food Trade Corporation. Once the current Q&A session comes to an end, we'll be able to learn whether the lawmakers were able to come to a consensus on the Agriculture Minister appointment. And I'll be sure to update you on that in our later newscast. Daniel?
All right, thank you for those updates, Se-min. Moving on, Korea provides various small loan programs for people with low incomes, and the process is about to get a lot easier thanks to a one-stop hub in the capital. Attending the opening of the Korea Inclusive Finance Agency on Friday, President Park Geun-hye asked officials to develop customized microfinancing programs through consultations with applicants so the public can efficiently manage their debts and better plan their finances.
이제부터 중요한 과제는 서민금융 지원의 세 개 핵심 영역인 지원 대상 선정, 상품 개발, 전달 체계 모두를 혁신해서 어려움에 처한 서민들에게 보다 실질적인 도움을 드리는 것입니다. 채무 관리는 물론 취업과 창업, 재산 형성과 노후 설계까지 맞춤형 종합 서비스가 이루어질 수 있도록 상담 시스템과 전달 체계를 꾸준히 혁신해 나가기를 바랍니다.
The first microfinancing center was launched in 2014, and before the year is up, a national network of 33 such centers will be up and running. Also, the Korean government is joining in efforts to help Hanjin Shipping unload its stranded cargo as the company sits on the brink of bankruptcy. The government on Friday laid out plans to unload most cargo on Hanjin's vessels by the end of next month. 35 of Hanjin's 97 leased and owned container ships have already completed the process. Although all of the company's chartered vessels have been ordered to be returned to their owners, dozens are still waiting at sea. Funds provided by the chairman of Hanjin Group and money from Hanjin's biggest shareholder, Korean Air, will cover the cost of unloading. The government anticipates continued efforts from these parties should help resolve the supply chain disruption. For the first time in 2 years, unionized bank workers are going on strike in protest of the adoption of a performance-based wage system. According to the Korea Financial Industry Union, which has roughly 100,000 members nationwide, about 50,000 workers are taking part in that, quite a contrast to the government's estimates of 20,000. Despite the demonstrations, the majority of banks' daily operations are running as normal. The government has been pushing to implement the system where salaries are based on performance with the goal of raising the sector's competitiveness. But the union argues it's only aimed at maximizing short-term performance and will lead to unnecessary internal competition. Turning to the shooting incident that stoked long simmering tensions over race and policing in the U.S., the third night of protests in Charlotte, North Carolina proved largely peaceful. With the National Guard deployed, the city's mayor has signed an order for a nightly curfews from midnight through 6 a.m. Despite the first night's curfew coming into effect, police allowed protests to continue and will reportedly not arrest violators as long as they are peaceful. The curfews will remain in effect until the governor declares an end to the city's state of emergency. Emergency services in Charlotte have confirmed the African-American protester who was shot Wednesday night, reportedly by another civilian, has died. Now, many of us have grown so numb to shocking tragedies happening around the world that we felt indifferent even at the image of a Syrian boy sitting in an ambulance covered in dust and blood after his home was hit by a bomb in the war-torn country. Putting grown-ups like us to shame is a letter by a 6-year-old boy. Simple, straightforward, honest, but more powerful and moving than anything I've read in my life. Han Da-eun shares with us his words.
A letter written by a 6-year-old boy from New York named Alex has once again focused the world's attention on the Syrian refugee crisis. He writes, "Dear President Obama, remember the boy that was picked up by the ambulance in Syria? Can you please go get him and bring him to our home? We will give him a family and he will be our brother." The tragic image of the Syrian boy, Omran Daknish, which vividly captured the reality of the ongoing civil war, sent shockwaves across the world last month.
And we'll be waiting for you guys with flags, flowers, and balloons.
The U.S. president shared the letter with the world during his speech at the United Nations Summit on Refugees.
Those are the words of a 6-year-old boy. The humanity that a young child can display, who hasn't learned to be cynical or suspicious or fearful of other people.
President Obama has posted a video of Alex reading the letter out loud on Facebook. The post has since garnered thousands of likes and shares, demonstrating that genuine compassion for our fellow human beings still has the power to move the world. Han Da-eun, Arirang News.
Let's move on to a different story now. The first ever Korea-China-Japan sports ministers meeting wrapped up on Friday with the signing of the Pyeongchang Declaration. From enhancing social and cultural prosperity through sports to successfully hosting the upcoming Olympics, Lee Ji-won has more on what the ministers discussed.
The sports ministers of Korea, China, and Japan wrapped up the first ever Korea-China-Japan sports ministers meeting on Friday in the eastern county of Pyeongchang, which will host the Winter Olympic Games in 2018. On the second and final day of the two-day meeting, Korea Sports Minister Cho Yun-sun and her Chinese and Japanese counterparts Liu Peng and Matsuno Hirokazu held their first round of trilateral talks and signed the Pyeongchang Declaration. The document details the country's plans for greater cooperation in sports, including an expansion of sports exchanges to increase the participation of women, teenagers, and the elderly, and strategies for fostering the sports industry in order to enhance social and cultural prosperity in the East Asian region.
Through the Pyeongchang Declaration, we acknowledge that sports cooperation and exchanges can become an important foundation for understanding people in each country, and we promise to work toward future-oriented cooperation.
Minister Cho also emphasized the importance of exchanging information on hosting the Olympics, as all three countries prepare to host either the Summer or Winter Olympics in the coming years. At a forum held on the sidelines of the meetings, experts shared their insights on the direction the three host countries should take as they get ready for the Olympics in the months and years to come. They also evaluated previous Olympics and provided analysis of case studies on successful host cities. Before the sports leaders parted, they enjoyed a farewell luncheon and promised to work toward the goals laid out in the declaration until their next meeting in Japan in 2018. 이지원, 아리랑 뉴스 평창.
That wraps up our newscast for this hour. Thank you for watching.